Hello everyone, Kizlingon here. Now recently I made myself a 1v1 arena tier list, and that I posted on Reddit. That got some interesting feedback, and I thought it would be fun to follow up with a little bit of commentary explaining the logic behind where I placed certain civilizations. And so I'll be starting up a bit of a video series here on YouTube, and it's going to be my own tier list series. So I'm going to cover all 31 civs, and they've been broken up into 5 different tiers: S, A, B, C, and D. So S being the best and D being the worst, or at least in my opinion. So this is going to be a series of 5 videos that I'm going to dedicate one video to one tier each, and just going through the different civs in each tier and just explaining the different things that they have going for them, why I like them, why I don't like them, things like that. So, just to preface this, this is just my personal arena tier list. There is no one right tier list. I've certainly met people my skill level around 1800 Vubli or so that have completely different civ preferences, and also even higher skilled players like 2K plus who definitely have different tastes in civilizations. So this is just really a subjective tier list for the most part. But that being said, I have played with all the civilizations quite a lot, and I think I've definitely defined my own playstyle, and I've ordered the civs in such a way where I feel it's very indicative of the kind of civs that I like versus the civs that I don't like. So, this being the first video, is going to be dedicated to the S tier, aka the civilizations that I consider to be the best for arena. So, let's get into it. So, once again, when it comes to the S tier, these are the civs that I consider to be the best for arena. They have powerful Imperial Age armies as well as early aggressive options, and most have powerful economy bonuses that can help out their aggression, their boom, or both. So, with that in mind, civ number 1, top of my S tier, is Teutons. This might be a bit of a surprise for some people, considering, especially people who are more familiar with open maps, where the Teutons don't exactly shine because of their lack of mobility. But on a closed map like this on Arena, where mobility is not that big of a concern just because you don't have nearly as much space to run around, I think this is the kind of map where Teutons can really shine. So for starters, it's a civ that gives you options, as I mentioned. So for starters, they have great monks as kind of either an offensive measure or defensive measure, and combined with their conversion resistance bonus as well as their 2 times healing rate, they have some of the better monks in the game. And on top of that, their defensive potential is top tier, and because of the aforementioned conversion resistance bonus, they are very smush resistant. In fact, you'd have to be pretty suicidal in order to smush Teutons, unless maybe you're a Native American civ, aka Aztecs or Incas, with their own great monks, as well as their Eagle Warriors, which can help deal with the Teuton monks. But even still, it's risky. And on top of that, they're trush resistant because their own towers have double the garrison space. So it's really hard, if not impossible, for the Teutons to lose a tower war. And later on in the game, they have one of the most powerful and diverse post-Imperial Age armies to look forward to. They have paladins. They do miss husbandry, but again, considering the lack of space to run around, the fact that their paladins are a little bit slower usually is not that big of a deal. Siege onagers that have ironclad, they can be super difficult to deal with, especially if you're trying to use light cav to try and snipe them. Gunpowder units, hand cannoneers, bombard cannons with siege engineers, as well. They have bombard tower access. So, this is a combination of units that no other civilization in the game has, and therefore the Teutons can really tailor their army compositions to deal with just about any threat they face. The only real downsides that I can think of for the Teutons is the fact that they are somewhat reliant on gold. Their signature army comp of Halb and Ironclad SO, though, isn't too gold intensive, assuming you can keep the siege onagers alive. And considering they have extra melee armor through Ironclad, it's going to be pretty tricky to snipe them with light cav or any of those sorts of units while the halberdiers are defending them. As well, they have fairly few bad matchups, and that's another reason why I really enjoy the civ. The only civs that I can think of that could give the civ some trouble are civs with good siege and or anti-siege options. So, for example, Celts, Ethiopians, Koreans, Mongols, these civs that have either comparable or perhaps even better siege, arguably, and in the case of Mongols, a very strong anti-siege option that also happens to be quite mobile in the manga die. But other than that, the civ is fantastic, and I'm always happy to see this civ when I random them. Number 2 on my S tier, we have the Turks. Now, the big thing about the Turks that propels them to such a high spot on this tier list is the fact that they have access to the Janissary unique unit. This unique unit is one of, if not the best unique units for Arena, and that's because of the insane combination of 17 attack, or specifically 17 pierce damage, on top of having 8 range, which outranges most things in the game at this point in the game and during Castle Age. Outrange mangonels, outrange scorpions, it outranges generic crossbows and skirmishers, things like that. On top of that, their gold mining bonus, it is not really the biggest economy bonus, but if you're pushing early with Janissaries and mangonels and things like that, those units all cost gold, and so being able to mine gold faster certainly helps in that regard. If you're a bit more of a passive player who doesn't like to go all in with just one or two TC aggression, that kind of thing, they also have a nice option for taking map control with their free light cav, and they're, I'd say, one of the better civilizations to secure map control with light cav because they get free access to them. This can help them secure their map control, grab relics, and the relics especially can be quite helpful for Turks considering they need a lot of gold to get to their best options. Like the Teutons, they have a similarly terrifying late game, although it's not quite as diverse in my opinion. They do get full gunpowder access, hand cannoneers with extra HP, bombard cannons with extra HP, their Janissary unique unit, and of course access to bombard towers that have 13 range, the best bombard towers in the game in my opinion. But if they also have another great option with their heavy cav archers that have Spahi, the unique tech, and this can make their cav archers either the best or second best depending on the certain specific circumstances they're used in, seeking only competition from the Magyars, and combined with their free access to Hazar as well as access to siege rams supported by their bombard towers, it can be another great alternative for the Turks in the late game. Unfortunately for Turks, they do have more obvious bad matchups than Teutons do, and I'm talking civilizations that are very strong for cavalry or camels, such as Berbers or Indians, and this mainly exploits the Turks' lack of even pikemen, lacking halberdier and even lacking pikemen, so dealing with strong cavalry or camels is definitely going to be a challenge for the civ. As well, they might struggle against powerful archer and anti-gunpowder civs because archers are a nice answer to the gunpowder heavy army that the Turks will likely go for. So civs like Britons, Mayans, Ethiopians, Italians, and in this case of Italians, they also have access to the condottiero, which is anti-gunpowder, as well as the Genoese crossbow, which is anti-cavalry. And those two units can really give the Turks a bit of a hard time because cavalry and gunpowder is their two mainstays for their late game, for their Imperial Age army. Also, not exactly an archer civ, more of a cav archer civ, but Mongols can also give the Turks a hard time because their Mangadai are anti-siege, and being ranged units, they're quite good against their gunpowder, and they also win quite convincingly with equal numbers against Turk cav archers as well. So all these civs can give the Turks a bit of a hard time, but still, I think it's hard to go wrong with a civ, and it's not a civ I'm usually ever unhappy to get. And as well, their other big downside is the fact that they are the most gold-dependent civ in the game, as I was talking about them grabbing relics earlier. They only have hussars as a fully upgraded trash unit. They don't get pikemen even. They don't get elite skirmishers. So you really need to keep an eye on your gunpowder, your cav archers. But considering their very high damaging ranged units, you have the potential to keep your gold army alive for quite a long time, assuming you're paying attention to them. So the fact that they're gold dependent can make a difference sometimes, and other times it might not. Moving on to number 3 in my S tier, we have the Spanish. Now, their most famous trait is the fact that they have the access to the Conquistador unique unit. It's another gunpowder-based unique unit that is quite strong. Similar to Janissaries, they have the great potential for going aggressive or taking over the map, things like that. Although I personally don't like Conquistadors as much as Janissaries for Arena because of mainly 2 factors. One is the fact that Conquistadors, one of their big selling features is the fact that they're quite mobile. And on a closed map like Arena where you don't have as much space to run around, I don't think they can capitalize on their mobility aspect as much. As well, they have shorter range than Janissaries, 6 compared to 8. And that deficit of range, I think, can really make a difference when you're facing monks especially. Conquistadors are very expensive units, 60 food and 75 gold a pop. And if you're getting them converted, that's a big loss for you. So I personally don't... But that being said, they do have more bulk and more armor than Janissaries, and so they at least have that going for them. On top of that, they have amazing monks as another option for going aggressive. They have a full monk tech tree. They have access to the missionary if for whatever reason wanted to use that, but usually it's not the case. It's a pretty rare sight. As well, they have some of the best monks in the game. I would say, if you're specifically looking at the job of converting units, I'd say they're probably even the best with the Inquisition technology, although that technology usually factors in a little bit later. And combined with Conquistadors and Siege, they can make for a very strong either mid-game push or an early Imperial Age push. On top of that, they have one of the most open tech trees in the game to look forward to, and a very powerful late game, with things like Paladins, Siege Rams, Gunpowder Access, Bombard Towers, as well as full trash. They are the only civilization in the game that has a fully fleshed out trash tech tree, so fully upgraded Hussars, Elite Skirmishers, and Halberdiers, so they're very well equipped for the late game, at any stage of the late game. And as a result of their very wide tech tree, they have a very strong ability to tailor their army comps to fight any civ in the game. And as a result, they have few, if any, bad matchups, and yeah, there's very little to not like about this civ. The main reasons why I put them on number 3 is because, again, I don't like conks as much as Janissaries on Arena, and the fact that the Spanish, unfortunately, they don't have much of an economy bonus that helps out either with their aggression, like with the Turks, or their boom, like the farm bonus for the Teutons can help them out. Moving on to number 4 in my S tier, we have the Portuguese. And with the Portuguese, we close out the triumvirate of the gunpowder civilizations, unless maybe you want to count Indians as a gunpowder civ, which, even though they're classified as one in their tech tree description, I personally don't consider them to be a gunpowder civ. But anyways, I digress. Back to the point of Portuguese. I think their biggest selling feature is their unique unit again, like the previous 2 civilizations, the organ gun. Now, of the 3 gunpowder unique units, I personally like the organ guns the best because for a variety of reasons. The first is that they have good bulk. Not quite as tanky as Conquistadors, but they're still quite up there with 60 HP a pop. And unlike Janissaries, for example, they actually have good pierce armor. Ranged units is actually one of the better ways to deal with gunpowder units, but the fact that organ guns have 4 base pierce armor means ranged units aren't going to be as threatening to them. As well, they're considered siege, and so you need redemption in order to be able to convert these units if the opponent wanted to use monks against them. And if their civ does not have the redemption tech, that option is completely off the table for them. They'll have to rely on other things like defensive guard towers, a defensive castle, things like that. On top of that, the last big point is the fact that they have no food cost, unlike conks and Janissaries. So you have an easier time booming up, and it's actually a great candidate for doing a very fast castle drop and aggressive push. If you start with a mill before a lumber camp, you can go up as fast as 25 plus 2 with 3 deer. I've actually pulled off this strategy quite a few times myself. And Portuguese is definitely my favorite civ to do that kind of strategy with because of the strength of the organ gun. On top of that, they have Great Monks as another aggressive option. They only miss Illumination in their tech tree, but they do have all the Castle Age techs, so they're perfectly fine for a Monk Rush. And their gold discount bonus can help out a little bit, although it's definitely doesn't hold a candle compared to the Turks gold mining bonus for their aggressive strategies or anything like that. Now, the main reasons why I have them at position number 4 is the fact that they again they're lacking a bit of a good eco bonus like the Spanish before them. And the reason why I have them below Spanish is because even though their tech tree for the late game is similarly open, they have some more holes in them in their tech tree compared to the Spanish. So things like missing squires, hussar, paladin, siege ram, these things can kind of knock them down a peg in the late game, although it's still a nice tech tree. You still have a lot of options at your disposal. And this is a civ most of the time I'm quite happy to random. Number 5 on my S tier, we have the Slavs, a civilization that's really been coming into its own recently, especially on open maps, and it turns out they're very solid on closed maps as well. So why is that? Well, for starters, they have an amazing mid-game economy with the fastest farmers in the game. And this gives them an amazing economic basis for booming and or taking map control with scouts like Cav and potentially even knights later on. And speaking of good economic basis, they also have a great one for going a smush, because they have a great monk tech tree, getting all the important upgrades for their monks for the early stages of a smush. And on top of that, they have their siege discount, which can help out in that same strategy. And they also have a very nice, a very fast Imperial Age advanced time potential with their fast farmers. This can help them get to important texts like block printing, illumination, theocracy, the Imperial Age monk texts faster than most other civs in this game. Their late game, it's fairly narrow, but at the same time it is extremely powerful. With access to Druzhina infantry, which is some of the best infantry in the game, a full access to the siege workshop except for the bombard cannon, so they have siege rams, siege onagers, heavy scorpions, all discounted. For cavalry, they have cavalier and hussar access. It's pretty decent cavalry, though nothing top tier. Great monks with their orthodoxy tech and pretty open monk tech tree if they need it. Unfortunately for this civilization, they miss heresy and faith, so their siege, while it's very strong, is also quite vulnerable to conversions. So if you're facing a civ that has access to good monks, namely getting the important text redemption and block printing, you're going to be hard-pressed to use siege against those civs, assuming they're making the monks. And it's especially dangerous if you're going siege onagers, for instance. If you have a battalion of Druzhina infantry out in front of your siege, and you're backing them up with siege onagers, and you get 1 or 2 of the siege onagers converted, and those siege onagers can absolutely obliterate your entire army of infantry, and so it can be really risky in those situations. They have no arbalest or gunpowder access at all, which means dealing with similarly strong infantry civs, such as perhaps Aztecs, Japanese, I guess you can maybe argue Malay with their karambits and their trash two-handed swordsmen, assuming they can get up the proper numbers. It can be somewhat tricky. Their only real clean answer to support their infantry is heavy scorpions, which are at least discounted, and it can be nice, but I wouldn't say they completely replace lacking arbalest and gunpowder. And they also have some extremely unpleasant matchups. So again, civs with better monks, such as Aztecs, Teutons, and Spanish before them, assuming those civs are making use of their monks. And also civs that can counter their rather predictable late game, like Teutons, again, because they have comparable or better siege and infantry. Incas, because they have counters for everything, including monks with redemption and block printing, which can threaten their siege. As well as Aztecs and potentially even post-Imperial Age Burmese with their very strong champions, and Byzantines if they're able to work up to cataphracts. Coming in at number 6 on my S tier, we have the Aztecs. Now, pro opinion would put this civilization as either number 1 or number 2 on Arena. But personally, I don't like them as much because they just don't fit my style as well as the civs above them. But still, they are definitely very strong and definitely worthy of being in the S tier. So this civilization's claim to fame, well, they actually have multiple claims to fame, actually. The first is their relic bonus, 33% extra relic gold generation. An Aztec with 5 relics is considered a very dangerous thing on Arena, and this puts pressure on your opponent, whatever civ they may be, to contest map control to try and take as many relics away from the Aztecs player as they possibly can. Normally it's good to go for the relics yourself if you're feeling the game could potentially go long because that passive gold income is quite nice. And in the case of the Aztecs, it's not so much for your own benefit, but it's for the benefit of taking the relics away from the Aztecs so they don't have a huge advantage over you. On top of that, they have a great economy throughout the game, especially their farmers, which are the recipients of the most benefits with their extra carry capacity bonus. You can think of their farmers as having an extra wheelbarrow tech attached to them, so it makes them the second best farmers in the game after the Slavs. They also have the best overall monks in the game, with their extra 5 HP that they get per monk tech that they research. Aztec monks can get up to 95 HP in post-Imperial Age if you get all the monk techs. And these can be very difficult to deal with, especially for civs that don't have the heresy tech. They also have faster military production, actually, tech tree regularly says 15%, but in practice it's 18% faster military production. This can help them get up with eagles, crossbows, that kind of thing in the mid-game, faster than pretty much any other civilization in the game. This can help them secure map control, help them go aggressive faster, and things like that. And of course, in the Imperial Age, this also helps with their infamous Elite Eagle Warrior power spike. And combined with rams, it can make for an extremely deadly early Imperial Age push, and it can outright end games, assuming the opponent is not ready for it, or they don't have a civ that deals with those particular units very well. Unfortunately for this civilization, the reason why I rate them lower than pro opinion is just simply because there are a number of factors. The first is that they're heavily reliant on power spikes to carry them to victory. So once again, this talk about the whole Elite Eagle Warrior power spike combined with rams, it's very strong. But if you're, for whatever reason, not able to seal the deal and kill your opponent early on, like maybe they have a very safe map, or maybe they have a good unit that can deal, maybe a unique unit that can deal with that combination of units, you're going to start to struggle against a variety of civilizations. And the Aztecs, although they do have very strong moments, they also have equal moments where they're not as strong, namely the post-Imperial stage of the game. And the most glaring weakness for the Aztecs is against heavy cavalry civs, namely paladins or elephants. Now, granted, it is rather difficult for many of these paladin or elephant civilizations to get to those options, but some, like Franks, Teutons, or Malay, with great economies of their own and their own ability to take map control or just have a very powerful mid-game boom and things like that, they can definitely give the Aztecs a run for their money. And if they get to these units, paladins and elephants, the Aztecs will really struggle. Because they don't have halbs, they only get pikemen, which do get extra 4 attack from the Garland Wars tech, but it is not a replacement for having access to halberdiers against heavy cavalry. Their monks can also help, but unfortunately the aforementioned civs all have access to heresy, so it won't be all that threatening. And if you're in a in any case, if you're in a post-imperial stage where you have huge masses of armies clashing into each other, monks definitely dramatically fall off in usefulness. So it's not really a unit type that the Aztecs deal with very well. They may struggle to deal with similarly powerful infantry civs like Japanese, post-Imperial Age Slavs, Malay, things like that, because they have weak arbalests, no access to heavy cavalry at all, being a Native American civilization, and no gunpowder access. At that point, their only real clean answer would be their own +8 champions, which can work against some infantry units, but others that are other very strong infantry units still might be able to take care of them. In that case, they might have to rely on Jaguar warriors, which are not the easiest unit to field because they require castles, and on top of that, even when you do have the castles, it is the slowest producing infantry unique unit in the game at 17 seconds base. Well, actually 20 seconds base creation time reduced to 17 seconds with the Aztecs' faster military creation speed. So still, it's very slow. And you might find that if you're trying to go for Jaguars, the Jaguars might end up getting overwhelmed by the units that they're supposedly supposed to counter. So Aztecs can have a really tough time against these kinds of civs. So once again, they have no cavalry access to any kind, so if you do find yourself in the post-imperial stage of the game, you're going to have to spend gold on something, whether it's rams in combination with your Garland Wars pikes or Eagle Warriors if you want to raid. As well, they're extremely reliant on gold, speaking of which. They're the second most gold-dependent civ in the game after Turks, in my opinion, because Eagles, Monks, and Siege all cost an absolute ton of gold. You're going to just burn through it so quickly. But other than that, I cannot deny the strength of the civilization, and I definitely still have to put them in S tier because they definitely have their moments, and they definitely have a place in the game with their very strong power spike potentials. Last on my S tier, number 7, we have the Malay. Again, just like with the Aztecs, professional opinion rates this civilization as number 1 or number 2 on Arena. And like with Aztecs, the reason why I have them lower on this tier is mainly because they just don't fit my style as well as most of the other civs above them. So, the Malays' main claim to fame is the fact that they have an amazing booming potential with the extra 4 villagers that you can create in the Dark Age as a result of their faster age-up potential. So you can go up on 4 extra villagers compared to a generic civilization. For example, if a generic civ wanted to go up on 27 plus 2, for like a standard 3 TC boom, the Malay can go up on 31 plus 2 and still reach the Castle Age a bit earlier than their opponent and get on with their own boom. That, of course, will be boosted as a result of the extra 4 villagers that they made. And they also have solid monks as an aggressive option. They only miss Theocracy and Fervor, which aren't huge losses. They can be during certain stages of the game, Theocracy, especially in post-imp, but for an early monk rush, it's not that big of a loss. It's an amazing civ to challenge the Native American civs, Aztecs, Mayans, and Incas, and that's mainly because they have great options for dealing with the Eagles and Archers, which are usually the 2 mainstays of any good army for a Native American civ. With access to things like their battle elephants that are discounted, as well as their Karambit warrior unique unit, they can really clamp down on those 2 unit types, and so the Native American civs can have a bit of a rough time against the Malay. They can counter everything in the late game. If you were to think of like a different counter civ, like for example Byzantines, you can kind of think of the Malay as kind of like the Byzantines in the late game. They have an above average response to just about everything. So against cavalry, they have fully upgraded halberdiers. Against archers, they have fully upgraded skirms, onagers with siege engineers, and karambit warriors, which, when utilized en masse, can actually overwhelm most archers in the game. And against infantry, they have fully upgraded arbalests. They have heavy scorpions with siege engineers, if you wanted to use those. They have elite battle elephants. And so they're very well equipped to deal with just about anything that comes out against them. As well, they also automatically win in post-imp trash war, in the trash war phase of the game, because of their no gold costing 2-handed swordsman, assuming you have enough gold left to research the forced levy tech. Because the 2-handed swordsman is essentially at that point essentially becomes an anti-trash unit. Swordsmen are usually very good at countering trash units, and they're just that much better when they don't cost any gold themselves. Now, the main reasons why I don't like the Malay is because of, although their faster age up time can be nice for a booming potential, it can be somewhat of a hindrance if you're trying to do some other strategies. Like, for example, I like to take map control with scouts or crossbows in certain games. And with the Malays' faster uptime, I find that their food economy especially is quite tight compared to a generic civ with a generic uptime. And as a result of that, I find it's really difficult to get the food I need for the text that I want. So for example, if I'm taking map control with scouts, I would want to get bow saw, heavy plow, and perhaps even light cav depending on if my opponent is taking map control themselves, all while still trying to maintain vil production from the town center. And with the Malays' faster uptime kind of robbing them of some food at the start of Castle Age, I find it's very difficult to be able to get all of those technologies. I'm lucky if I'm able to research bow saw on top of keeping up with vil production, and I might have to massively delay either the light cav upgrade or the heavy plow upgrade, things like that. It's a similar story with Expos as well. I might be able to keep up vil production and maybe grab Expo, but I won't really be able to grab bow saw very comfortably, and I definitely will. It's definitely something I just don't like about. That's just an aspect of the civ that I don't really enjoy. On top of that, their cavalry is some of the worst in the game, getting only the first armor upgrade. This really means their only usable stable unit is their elephants, and even then their elephants are somewhat situational. You don't want to be using them against civilizations that have very strong ranged units because of their lack of pierce armor. But if you're facing a civ that doesn't have very good archers and mainly focuses on melee-oriented units, you can use the Malay battle elephants just fine, because the lack of 20 HP for missing bloodlines and the lack of 2 melee armor for missing chain and plate barning really just does not matter when the most common units, melee units they will be facing, like halberdiers or camels, they have double-digit attack bonuses against their elephants. So the fact that they miss a little bit of stats compared to the better battle elephant civs, it really just doesn't make that much of a difference. And in my opinion, is more than made up for the fact that they're so cheap. And with those downsides aside, though, when used right, this civilization is definitely extremely powerful, and it's definitely worthy of the number 1 or number 2 spot for Arena, as most experts say. It's just they don't work as well for my kind of style of play, so that's why I rated them lower, but they're still so strong that I had to keep them in S tier. And so with that, we close out my S tier. In the next video, I'll be exploring the A tier civilizations, and so make sure you keep an eye out for that.